All right, let's dive into Arthur Miller's The Crucible. I bet you've heard of the Salem witch trials.
Oh, absolutely.
And this play throws us right into 1692 Salem, right in the middle of it. But this deep dive, what makes it interesting is that we're not just going to, you know, rehash the history.
Right.
We're going to see how Miller uses this intense historical backdrop to really show us some timeless human struggles like mass hysteria and how hard it is to choose between reputation and integrity and how people in power can exploit fear, to really bad ends.
It's amazing how Miller doesn't just retell history. He really digs into the Puritans and how their beliefs and that society set the stage for this explosion of fear.
Okay, so paint that picture for us. What was it about their worldview that made them so vulnerable to this kind of witch hunt?
Well, just imagine living in a world where you truly believe that the devil is real and is constantly trying to tempt you.
Yep.
Yeah. And then add to that this really rigid social structure where your reputation is everything. Anything you do that's different makes you suspicious. That's Salem. Fear of the devil wasn't just an idea, it was like part of everyday life.
So these people were basically waiting for any little thing to set them off, like a spark that could cause a wildfire.
Exactly. And Abigail Williams, she's the antagonist in the play. She's that spark. You might think, oh, just another villain who wants power.
Right.
But it's deeper than that. Miller shows how Abigail knows exactly how to use the community's fears to get what she wants.
Okay, I want to understand that.
Yeah.
What does she actually do? Because it just seems like she was a teenager who got caught dancing in the woods and is trying to stay out of trouble.
That's what's so brilliant. Abigail plays the victim.
Wow, okay.
She knows the adults will believe her, especially when she accuses people of witchcraft. But
Wow.
she's not just reacting, she's planning. Think about it. Who would dare to question a young woman who says the devil is tormenting her? It's genius manipulation.
So she takes their fear of the supernatural and uses it to gain control.
Yeah.
And then there's John Proctor, stuck right in the middle of it all. He's not exactly a saint himself. He had that affair with Abigail.
Right, but that's what makes John Proctor so interesting. He's made mistakes, but he can also be really brave. His affair becomes the weapon Abigail uses against him, but it also forces him to look at his own hypocrisy.
He's in a tough spot. Does he tell the truth and risk ruining his reputation by admitting the affair? Or does he keep quiet and risk his wife, Elizabeth, being condemned?
Proctor's struggle really gets to the heart of the play. Do you protect your reputation or do you live with integrity? In a world where your social standing is everything, confessing to an affair could cost you your livelihood, your place in the community, everything. It's a lose-lose situation.
I imagine fear and suspicion spread quickly in that kind of environment.
Mhm.
How does the play show that hysteria taking over the whole community?
The Crucible is so chilling because it shows how fast this witch hunt gets out of control. Miller uses really powerful imagery to show the chaos. Like the courtroom scenes become this frenzy of accusations. Nobody's thinking clearly.
Wow, you're painting a really vivid picture. It sounds like the idea of justice is completely lost in all the personal vendettas and power grabs.
Exactly. The place that should be about fairness becomes a tool for people who just want to take advantage of the situation. And if you question the accusers or try to defend the truth, you become a target yourself.
That's what's so scary, the idea that anyone could be caught up in all of this, even if they're innocent.
Yeah. And it makes you think, how would we react in a similar situation? Would we have the courage to speak up, even if it meant risking our safety, our own standing in the community?
These questions feel relevant even centuries later.
Right. The Crucible might be set in 1692, but the themes of mass hysteria, manipulation, and the failure of justice, those resonate today. But before we connect those dots, let's pause here for a moment.
The Crucible really shows how fear and pressure can make us do things that go against what we believe in. It's like holding up a distorted mirror to us.
And a great example of that is John Proctor and how much he struggles. Remember, he's not just trying to save Elizabeth.
Right.
He's fighting with his own conscience.
When he shouts, "Because it is my name,"
Mm-hmm.
that really shows his inner conflict.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not about reputation for him, it's about who he is.
Yeah, in a world where your word is everything and public shame is the worst thing that could happen, signing a false confession is basically spiritual suicide.
It's interesting to think about how that pressure to conform, to protect your reputation, it happens throughout history, even today. I mean, are we that different from Salem?
It's something to think about. Think about whistleblowers, people who risk their jobs and reputations to expose something wrong in a powerful organization, or even people who stand up to bullies knowing they'll be isolated or retaliated against.
Those are really good examples.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage to go against the grain, especially when you're up against powerful people.
And the Crucible definitely shows us how people in authority can use the system to their advantage. Judge Danforth, for instance. He's so stuck on following procedure, even when it's clear the accusations are false.
He seems to represent that blind faith, that unwillingness to admit the court could be wrong.
Exactly. Danforth becomes a symbol of how power can make people so self-righteous that they can't see the truth. He's so obsessed with keeping order and silencing anyone who disagrees that he forgets basic human decency.
It's like the system that's meant to protect innocent people is turned against them.
Right.
And this whole idea of justice versus injustice that feels so relevant today.
Absolutely. We see it with wrongful convictions, with biases in the legal system, and when powerful people get away with things.
The play also shows how easy it is to use fear to create scapegoats, to blame certain people or groups for society's problems.
Yeah, think about Elizabeth Proctor and Rebecca Nurse. They're both good people, respected members of the community, but they become targets because they're different, they're independent.
It reminds you that sometimes the most moral people, the ones who have the strongest sense of right and wrong, are the ones who are most vulnerable to these kinds of attacks.
That's right. They're easy targets for people who want to shift the blame, to take their own insecurities and put them on someone else. It's a classic tactic. Find a scapegoat, make people afraid, then make yourself look like the hero.
So what can the Crucible teach us about recognizing these patterns, about protecting ourselves from this kind of manipulation?
I think it tells us to be more careful, to question what we're told, especially when it's based on fear and appeals to our worst instincts. We need to ask who benefits from this fear, who's using it to get power and control.
It's like we need a crucible literacy or something,
Yeah.
a way to read between the lines to see through the manipulation and lies that can cloud our judgment.
Absolutely. It's about being critical, demanding evidence, and being wary of those who use our fears against us. And it's about having the courage to speak up against those in power, even when it's hard, even when it makes you unpopular.
Those are important lessons, especially in a time with so much information and social media echo chambers.
You're right. We're bombarded with information, and a lot of it is meant to make us react emotionally. It's easy to get caught up in the outrage, to jump on the bandwagon without stopping to ask, what's the truth? Who is this narrative really helping?
So the Crucible is like a guide for navigating the complexities of our world. It reminds us that the fight between truth and lies, justice and injustice, never ends, and we all have a part to play.
Absolutely. And one of the best things we can do is learn from the past, to see the patterns that led to the Salem witch trials and all the other examples of mass hysteria and injustice throughout history.
And maybe if we understand how those things happen, we can be more watchful, more compassionate, and more resistant to the things that try to divide and manipulate us.
But we shouldn't forget the individual stories in the Crucible. They're what make it so powerful. Beyond the big themes of societal breakdown and abuse of power, Miller also shows us the personal dramas that happen within this atmosphere of fear and suspicion.
You're right. Let's focus on those individual stories for a bit.
Yeah.
Because even though the play has these heavy themes, it's driven by the characters and what they go through.
And maybe no character shows that struggle better than John Proctor. The way he goes from a flawed person to a moral hero is one of the most gripping parts of the play.
His dilemma is something we can all relate to. He wants to protect his family, his reputation, everything he's worked for. But at the same time, he feels guilty and wants to do the right thing.
Right.
It's a tough spot to be in.
And that conflict makes his final decision so powerful. When he won't sign that confession knowing he'll die, he chooses integrity. He gets his good name back not by denying his past, but by refusing to compromise what he believes in, even when everyone's pressuring him.
It's a powerful moment of redemption.
Mm.
It shows that people can be morally courageous.
Mm.
And it reminds us that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is stand up for what you believe in, even if it costs you everything. It makes you think about Abigail, too. She's usually seen as just a manipulative villain, but Miller shows us more than that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I mean, what she does is definitely bad. But Miller gives us some background on her. He shows us that she's been abused and powerless. And that doesn't excuse what she does, but it makes you think about what made her who she is.
So instead of just condemning her, Miller wants us to see how complicated people's motivations can be.
Yeah.
Like even the villains are shaped by their experiences.
Right, and those experiences can be really messed up.
Exactly. The Crucible makes us question those simple categories of good and evil. Even in a witch hunt, there are shades of gray. There are human stories that are more complicated than simple labels.
Yeah, definitely.
That's one of the things that makes the Crucible so powerful. It's not a happy story, but it sticks with you. It makes you think about yourself, about the societies we build, about the choices we make when we're afraid.
Absolutely. And if you're intimidated by the actual text, Miller's language can be tough. There are some amazing movies that bring the story to life. The 1996 one especially, it captures the emotions and the intensity of the play.
Oh, I love that one. The cast is amazing, and the directing is great. It's a good way to experience the story, especially if you like visual things. But I still think everyone should try to read the play at some point. There's something about Miller's words on the page, the way he uses language to create the mood and the suspense. It's incredible.
Oh, I agree. And it's interesting how the movie makes some changes to the story. Like the relationship between Abigail and Proctor, it's less clear cut in the film. There's almost a hint that they really had a connection. And that adds a whole other level to their dynamic, makes their final confrontation even more tragic.
That's so true. And it shows how different ways of telling the story can offer different perspectives on the same material. Whether you read the play, watch the movie, or even just listen to this deep dive, the important thing is to think about the ideas, to let the story make you question your assumptions and think critically.
Because in the end, the Crucible isn't just a history lesson or a warning, it's a call to action. It's about recognizing the crucibles in our own lives, those times when we have to choose between what's easy and what's right, between protecting ourselves and standing up for what we believe in.
It reminds us that the choices we make, even when we're afraid, can shape not just our own lives, but the world around us. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Crucible, we have one question for you. What are the crucibles you face in your own life? And what kind of mark do you want to leave on the world?